Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair watching the stars drift past the main viewing screen of the UN's Liberty. The exploration ship had been patrolling the outer edge of human space for 3 months now, and Jake was starting to feel restless. Every day was the same routine: scan empty star systems, check for asteroid hazards, and file boring reports back to Earth Command. "Captain, we're approaching the Kepler 442 system," announced Lieutenant Lisa Grant from her communications station. Her fingers danced across the control panel as she adjusted the ship's long-range sensors. All systems showing normal readings. Jake nodded and stretched in his chair. Liberty was a good ship, but patrol duty was not exciting work. They had been hoping to find something interesting out here in the frontier, maybe signs of alien life or new planets suitable for colonization. Instead, they found empty space and lifeless rocks. "Take us into standard orbit around the 4th planet," Jake ordered. "Run a full geological scan. Maybe we'll find something worth mining." Chief Engineer Matt Davis looked up from his station near the back of the bridge. "Sir, the planet's mostly water with a few small continents. It's not much in the way of valuable minerals from what I can see on these readings." Jake sighed. Another dead end. Earth was running out of easily accessible resources, and humanity needed to expand into space to survive. But so far, they had found very little worth the enormous cost of interstellar travel. "Sir," Lisa called out suddenly, her voice tense with excitement. "I'm picking up something strange. It's a radio signal, but it's not coming from any of our ships." Yes. Jake felt his heart rate increase. In all of human history, no one had ever detected a radio signal from an alien source. They had been alone in the universe as far as anyone knew. "You sure it's not interference from our own equipment?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Lisa shook her head, her eyes fixed on her instruments. "Negative, sir. Signal is definitely artificial and coming from outside our solar system. The frequency patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Security Chief Karen Webb moved closer to Lisa's station, her hand instinctively resting on her sidearm. "Could it be a trap? Some kind of enemy transmission?" "I don't think so," Lisa replied, adjusting her headset. "The signal is weak and seems to be repeating the same pattern over and over. It almost sounds like ... double quotes." "Like what?" Jake asked. Lisa's face grew pale. "Like a distress call, sir." Jake stood up from his chair and walked over to the communications station. "Can you clean up the signal? Make it clearer?" "I'm trying, sir. The transmission is coming from very far away, at least 40 light years from here." Lisa's fingers flew over her controls, adjusting filters and amplifiers. "There, that's better. Listen to this." The bridge speakers crackled to life with an alien sound unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was definitely a voice, but not human. The tones rose and fell in a pattern that somehow conveyed deep sadness and desperation. Even though none of them could understand the words. "My God," whispered Matt from his engineering station. "We're really hearing aliens talk?" The alien voice continued for several minutes, repeating the same phrases over and over. Even without understanding the language, Jake could hear the pain and fear in the sounds. This was not a greeting or a peaceful message. This was someone calling for help. "Lisa, how long has this signal been transmitting?" Jake asked. Lisa checked her readings. "Based on the signal degradation, I'd estimate at least 6 months, maybe longer." "Captain, whoever is sending this has been calling for help for a very long time." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Somewhere out in the darkness of space, an alien civilization was in trouble. They had been crying out for help for months, and no one had answered. "Can we trace the source of the signal?" he asked. Matt pulled up a star chart on his screen. "The signal appears to be coming from a system about 37 light years from here. It's not on any of our standard navigation charts because it's so far outside human space." Jake stared at the display, his mind racing. This was the moment humanity had dreamed of for centuries: first contact with an alien species. But instead of a peaceful meeting between civilizations, they were listening to someone's desperate cry for help. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "I've been running the signal through our translation computers."
Yes?
"They've identified some basic mathematical patterns and emotional resonance frequencies. I think I can give you a rough idea of what they're saying." Do it, Jake ordered. Lisa took a deep breath and began to read from her screen. Help us, please. Anyone who can hear this message. Our world is dying. Our people are being killed. We are peaceful. We have never hurt anyone. Please help us. We don't have much time left. The bridge fell silent, except for the continued alien transmission. Jake looked around at his crew and saw the same mixture of shock and sadness on there. Faces that he felt in his heart. They're asking for help, Karen said softly. We're the only ones who heard them. Jake walked back to his command chair and sat down heavily. His orders were clear: patrol the outer rim of human space and report back to Earth Command. Was not supposed to leave his assigned sector or venture into unexplored territory, but how could he ignore a desperate plea for help? Captain, Matt said, even if we wanted to help them, it would take us weeks to reach their system.
Out.
And we don't know what kind of danger we'd be flying into. Jake nodded. Matt was right to be cautious. The Liberty was an exploration vessel, not a warship. They had basic defensive weapons, but nothing that could handle a serious military threat. If they flew into a war zone, they might end up needing rescue themselves. But as Jake listened to the alien voices continuing their desperate call, he thought about what it meant to be human. Throughout history, the best of humanity had always been shown when people helped strangers in need. When someone called for help, humans answered. It was what made them different from animals, the willingness to risk their own safety to help others. Lisa sent a message back to Earth Command. Tell them about the signal and our current position. Request immediate backup and instructions. Jake paused, then added, also tell them that we may not be able to wait for a response. Lisa looked at him with surprise. Sir, are you thinking of going to help them? Jake stood up and looked at the star chart showing the location of the alien signal. Oh, Lisa. How many ships do you think have passed close enough to that system to detect this transmission? Lisa consulted her computer. Based on normal space traffic patterns and the range of the signal, probably dozens of ships from various species have come within detection range over the past 6 months. And how many have answered their call for help? Jake asked. Lisa's expression grew sad. As far as we know, sir, none. We're the first to even acknowledge we heard them. Jake felt a surge of anger. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were advanced civilizations with the technology to travel between stars, and none of them had bothered to help a dying species. They had all heard the cries for help and chosen to ignore them. Set course for the source of the transmission, Jake ordered. Maximum speed. Karen stepped forward. Shouldn't we wait for orders from Earth Command? Jake turned to face his crew. We're going to be the first humans that aliens ever meet. What do we want them to think about our species? That we're the kind of people who hear someone calling for help and fly away? Or that we're the kind of people who come running when someone needs us? Matt smiled and began preparing the engines. For hyperspace jump? Course laid in, Captain. Ready to jump on your command? Jake settled back into his command chair and looked one more time at the stars ahead of them. In a few hours, they would either save an alien civilization or die trying. But they would not be the kind of people who ignored a cry for help. Jump, he ordered. The UN's Liberty dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of an alien solar system. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered from the transition back to normal space. Through the main viewing screen, he could see a beautiful blue-green planet surrounded by what looked like massive metal structures floating in orbit. Status report, Jake called out as his crew worked at their stations. We're in the target system, sir, announced Lisa Grant from communications. The distress signal is much stronger now. It's definitely coming from that planet. She paused, her face growing concerned. But Captain, I'm also detecting multiple large ships in orbit. They don't appear to be the same species that's sending the distress call. Jake studied the view screen more carefully. The metal structures he had first seen were actually enormous ships, each one at least 3 times the size of the Liberty. They looked like giant industrial platforms with weapons mounted on every surface. Those are mining ships, said Matt Davis from his engineering station, but they're also heavily armed. I count 12 of them, plus dozens of smaller vessels. Moving between the planet and the big ships, Security Chief Karen Webb checked her tactical displays. Sir, those ships have enough firepower to destroy a small moon. If they're hostile, We're in serious trouble. Jake felt his stomach tighten. They had come here to help whoever was sending the distress signal, but it looked like they had flown into the middle of a war zone. The alien ships were clearly much more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. Captain Lisa said urgently, "I'm receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's not the same as the distress signal we heard before. This one is directed specifically at us." "Put it through," Jake ordered. The bridge speakers filled with the sound of an alien voice. But this time, instead of the desperate cries they had heard before, the voice sounded amazed and hopeful. Lisa worked quickly at her translation computer, and after a few minutes, she began to interpret the message. "They're saying welcome," Lisa reported. "I can't believe someone actually came. They want to know who we are and why we answered their call for help." Jake took a deep breath. This was humanity's first real conversation with an alien species. "Tell them we are humans from the planet Earth. We heard their distress call and came to help." Lisa translated the message and sent it toward the planet. As Lisa worked to decode it, tears began forming in her eyes. "What are they saying?" Jake asked. Lisa wiped her eyes before answering. "They say they are the Zilani people. Their planet is called Aquatica Prime. They've been sending that distress call for 8 months, and we're the first ones to respond. Captain," they say, 17 different alien civilizations have detected their signal and ignored it. Everyone just flew away." Jake felt anger building in his chest. 17 different species had heard people crying for help and chosen to do nothing. What's happening to them? Lisa listened to the incoming transmission and continued translating. The big ships belong to something called the Harvac Empire. They invaded Aquatica Prime 6 months ago and are strip mining the planet. The Harvac are taking all the valuable minerals from the ocean floors and poisoning the water in the process. The Zilani are dying. Matt pulled up sensor readings of the planet on his screen. "Captain, look at this. The planet's oceans are filled with industrial waste. The water that should be crystal clear is turning brown and toxic. If this continues, nothing will be able to live there." Jake stared at the readings in horror. An entire world was being destroyed for profit, and the Zilani people were being murdered in the process. "How many Zilani are left?" Lisa asked the question and waited for the response. "They estimate about 2 million survivors, down from over 50 million before the invasion. Most are hiding in the deepest parts of the ocean, where the Harvac mining equipment can't reach them yet." "Sir," Kieran interrupted, "one of those big Harvac ships is turning toward us. I think they've noticed we're here." Jake watched as the massive alien vessel slowly rotated to face the Liberty. Weapon ports along its hull began to glow with energy. "Incoming transmission," Lisa announced. "It's from the Harvac ship." "Oh no!" Voice filled the bridge, speaking in harsh, guttural tones that sounded nothing like the musical voices of the Zilani. Lisa's computer worked to translate, and soon she could interpret the message. "They're ordering us to leave immediately," Lisa reported. "They say this system belongs to the Harvac Empire now, and any interference will be met with destruction. They're giving us 60 seconds to turn around and go." Jake looked around at his crew. They were badly outgunned and far from any help. The smart thing to do would be to retreat and wait for reinforcements from Earth. But the image of 2 million Zilani hiding in their poisoned oceans while their world died around them made that impossible. Lisa sent a message to the Harvac ship. "Tell them we are here on a humanitarian mission. We want to help evacuate the Zilani to safety." Lisa translated and sent the message. The response came back almost immediately, and it was not friendly. "They're laughing at us," Lisa said, her voice angry. "They say the Zilani are property of the Harvac Empire now. Anyone who tries to interfere will be destroyed as an example to others." Matt checked his instruments. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from all 12 of those ships. They're powering up their weapons." Jake made a decision that would change everything. "Take us down toward the planet. Stay low and use the atmospheric interference to mask our location." Karen looked at him with concern. "Sir, we can't fight all of those ships. They'll destroy us in minutes." "I'm not planning to fight them," Jake replied. "At least not yet. But we can't just abandon the Zilani." "Lisa, can you establish communication with the Zilani leadership?" Lisa worked at her console. "I'm getting A response from someone who calls himself Elder Nim Coralsinger. He says he's one of the surviving leaders of the Zilani people. Tell him we want to meet with him. We need to understand the situation better before we can help. As the Liberty descended through Aquatica Prime's atmosphere, Jake got his first close look at what the Harvac were doing to the planet. Massive. Mining platforms floated above the oceans, extending drilling equipment deep into the water. Where they worked, the beautiful blue seas turned murky brown with pollution. My God, whispered Matt. They're killing the entire planet. The Liberty landed in a hidden underwater cave that Elder Coralsinger had guided them to. Jake, Lisa, and Matt put on environmental suits and prepared to meet the first aliens in human history. Elder Coralsinger was waiting for them in an air-filled chamber deep within the cave system. Jake's first impression was of grace and beauty. The Zilani looked somewhat like dolphins that had evolved to walk upright, with smooth, translucent skin that glowed softly with internal light. Despite the terrible situation, Elder Coralsinger welcomed them with dignity. You are the first to answer our call, Coralsinger said through Lisa's translation device. We had begun to believe that the universe was filled only with creatures who cared nothing for the suffering of others. Jake felt ashamed of the 17 civilizations that had ignored the Zilani. We're sorry it took so long for someone to come. Can you tell us more about the Harvac? How can we help you? Coralsinger's bioluminescent patches dimmed with sadness. The Harvac Empire has conquered 43 worlds. They are the most feared military force in this part of the galaxy. No species has ever successfully resisted them. They take what they want and destroy everything else. What about your own defenses? Matt asked. We are a peaceful people, Coralsinger explained. We have never developed weapons of war. When the Harvac arrived, we tried to negotiate to offer them what they wanted in exchange for leaving our people alone, but they prefer to take everything by force. Lisa asked the question they were all thinking. How many ships does the Harvac commander have? Commander Vex Ironscale commands a full battle fleet, Coralsinger replied. 12 heavy battleships, plus support vessels. Each battleship carries enough firepower to level one of our cities. Jake did the math in his head. Even if Earth sent every military ship they had, humanity would still be vastly outnumbered. But looking at Elder Coralsinger and thinking about the 2 million Zilani hiding in the depths of their dying oceans, Jake knew they had to try something. Elder Coralsinger, we're going to help you, Jake said firmly. I don't know how yet, but we won't abandon your people. The Zilani Elder's skin brightened with hope for the first time in months. You would risk your lives for strangers, for people you have never met. Jake thought about what it meant to be human. Where we come from, when someone calls for help, you answer. It doesn't matter if they're strangers. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the Liberty's war room, staring at a holographic display showing the Harvac fleet positions above Aquatica Prime. Elder Coralsinger floated in a specially constructed water tank, his bioluminescent patches flickering. As he pointed out the enemy mining operations, the main processing center is here, Coralsinger explained through Lisa's translation device. They bring captured Zilani there to work as slaves in the refining plants. Many die from the toxic chemicals within days. Jake clenched his fists. The more he learned about the Harvac operations, the angrier he became. These weren't just invaders taking resources. They were systematically torturing and murdering an entire species. How many Zilani are being held in that facility? Asked Security Chief Karen Webb. Coralsinger's skin dimmed with sadness. Perhaps 3,000. They are mostly young and strong, taken from their families to work until they die. Matt Davis looked up from his engineering console. Captain, I've been studying the Harvac technology with help from the Zilani scientists. Their ships are powerful, but not very maneuverable. They rely on overwhelming firepower rather than tactics. What are you thinking, Matt? Jake asked. Well, sir, the Liberty is much faster and more agile than those big battleships. If we could hit them quickly and disappear before they could respond, we might be able to cause some damage. Karen shook her head. Even if we could damage one of their ships, they still have 11 more. We can't win a straight fight. Jake studied. The tactical display. Karen was right. They couldn't defeat the entire Harvac fleet in open battle. Maybe they didn't need to. Maybe they just needed to buy time and hope that Earth would send reinforcements. We're not going to fight all of them at once, Jake decided. We're going to hit them one target at a time. Quick strikes to disrupt their operations and rescue as many Zilani as possible. Lisa looked concerned. Captain Earth Command still hasn't responded to our messages? We're completely on our own out here. Jake had been thinking about that too. The Liberty was weeks away from the nearest human outpost. And even if Earth sent help immediately, it would take time for ships to arrive. The Zilani didn't have time to wait. Elder Coral Singer, Jake said, can your people help us? We need guides who know the ocean currents and underwater terrain. The Zilani elder's patches brightened. Many of our people know these waters better than the Harvac. They have lived here for thousands of years. But Captain Morrison, we are not warriors. We have never fought anyone. You don't need to fight, Jake assured him. Just help us move unseen and show us where the Harvac are most vulnerable. Over the next several hours, Jake and his crew worked with Zilani volunteers to plan their first strike. The target was a smaller mining platform that was processing stolen Zilani artifacts and cultural treasures. It was lightly defended compared to the main facilities, but destroying it would send a message to Commander Ironscale Matt had been working with Zilani engineers to modify the Liberty's weapon systems. The planet's unique electromagnetic field interfered with standard human technology, but the Zilani had developed ways to work around the problem. The modifications are complete, Matt reported. Our phaser arrays should work normally now, and I've boosted our shield generators using Zilani power crystals. Jake nodded. Karen, prepare a boarding team. If we're going to rescue prisoners, we'll need to get aboard that platform. Karen selected her best security officers and equipped them with modified weapons and breathing apparatus designed for underwater combat. The plan was simple. The Liberty would attack the mining platform from below, using the ocean to mask their approach until the last moment. As night fell over Aquatica Prime, Jake gave the order to begin their first mission. The Liberty rose from its hiding place in the underwater cave and began moving toward the target. Zilani guides swam alongside the ship, their glowing skin providing navigation markers in the dark water. Target in sight, announced Lisa from her sensor station. The mining platform is 2 kilometers ahead. I'm detecting about 50 Harvac personnel and approximately 200 Zilani prisoners. Jake felt his heart rate increase. This was it. Humanity's first military action on behalf of another species. All stations prepare for combat. The Liberty burst from the ocean surface directly beneath the mining platform. Catching the Harvac guards completely by surprise, Jake had counted. On their arrogance, they never expected anyone to be foolish enough to attack them. Fire, Jake commanded. The Liberty's phaser arrays lit up the night sky, striking the platform's shield generators and weapon systems. The Harvac responded quickly, but their heavy weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat, not for targeting a small, fast-moving vessel directly below them. Karen, launch the boarding teams. Jake ordered. Security Chief Webb and her officers used jetpacks to reach the platform's lower levels, while the Liberty provided covering fire. The Harvac warriors were tough and well-armed, but they were not prepared for the ferocity of humans fighting to protect innocent people. We've reached the prisoner holding area, Karen reported over the comm system. My God, Captain, the conditions here are horrible. These people are barely alive. Jake pushed down his anger and focused on the mission. Get him out of there, Karen. We don't have much time. Meanwhile, Matt was coordinating with Zilani technicians to reverse the platforms. Mineral extraction systems. Instead of sucking valuable resources from the ocean, the machinery began pumping the Harvac's own industrial waste back into their processing centers. Engineering sabotage complete, Matt announced with satisfaction. That platform won't be poisoning the ocean anymore. The rescue operation took 12 minutes from start to finish. By the time Harvac reinforcements arrived from the main fleet, the Liberty had disappeared back beneath the waves with nearly 200 freed Zilani prisoners. Commander Vex Ironscale's furious voice filled the comm channels as the Harvac realized what had happened. Lisa translated his angry words. He's calling us insects, Lisa reported. He says he's going to hunt us down and make an example of us that will be remembered across the galaxy. Jake smiled grimly.
Oh.
Tell him he's welcome to. The success of the first mission encouraged both the humans and the Zilani. Elder Coral Singer organized underwater supply lines to keep the Liberty hidden and fueled. While more Zilani volunteers came forward to help with future operations over the next week, Jake led 3 more successful strikes against Harvac facilities. They destroyed 2 more mining platforms and rescued over 800 Zilani prisoners. Each time, they used different tactics and struck from unexpected directions. The Harvac were becoming frustrated and angry. They had never faced an enemy that refused to fight a conventional battle. Commander Ironscale began spreading his fleet out to cover more area, but this made each ship more vulnerable to the Liberty's hit-and-run attacks. Captain Lisa announced during their 5th mission briefing, "I'm receiving a transmission from Earth Command." Jake's heart jumped. Finally, news from home. "What do they say?" Lisa's face broke into a huge smile. "Admiral Hayes is sending the entire 4th Fleet to help us. 18 ships, including the UN's Endeavor. They should arrive in 6 days." Crew cheered, but Jake remained focused. 6 days was a long time when facing an enemy like the Harvac. They would have to survive until help arrived. "Sir," Matt interrupted, "we have a problem. I'm detecting 6 new ships dropping out of hyperspace near the planet. Harvac reinforcements." Jake felt his stomach drop. The enemy fleet had just doubled in size, and Earth's help was still days away. Commander Ironscale's voice echoed across the comm channels, and Lisa quickly translated his message. "He says the games are over," Lisa reported. "He's declaring this entire system under military lockdown. Any ship that tries to leave will be destroyed." Jake looked around at his crew. They were trapped, outnumbered, and facing an enemy that was now taking them seriously. But when he thought about the Zilani families hiding in the deep ocean, waiting for rescue, he knew they couldn't give up. "All right, people," Jake said calmly. "We've got 6 days to keep the Harvac busy until the cavalry arrives.
I'll let show
them what humans can do when we're really motivated." The battle for Aquatica Prime was about to begin in earnest. The UN's Liberty shook violently as another Harvac energy blast struck its shields. Captain Jake Morrison held tight to his command chair as sparks flew from damaged control panels around the bridge. They had been running from the enemy fleet for 2 days straight, and their ship was falling apart. "Shield strength down to 30%, reported Matt Davis from his engineering station. "Captain, we can't take much more of this beating." Jake looked at the tactical display showing 18 Harvac ships closing in on their position. Commander Ironscale had finally gotten tired of playing games. Instead of chasing the Liberty through the underwater cave systems, he had decided to force them into open space where his superior firepower could finish them off. "How long until Earth's fleet arrives?" Jake asked. Lisa Grant checked her communications console. "For more days, sir. Admiral Hayes is pushing the engines as hard as they can, but they're still too far away." Security Chief Karen Webb shook her head grimly. "We'll never last for more days. The Harvac have us trapped in orbit. Every time we try to dive back into the ocean, they hit us with everything they've got." Jake knew she was right. The enemy had learned from their previous encounters. They now had ships positioned to block every escape route back to the planet's surface. The Liberty was caught in space with nowhere to hide. "Sir," Lisa called out urgently. "Incoming transmission from Commander Ironscale. He wants to talk." Jake straightened in his chair. "Put him through." The harsh voice of the Harvac commander filled the bridge. Through Lisa's translation, his words were cold and mocking. "Foolish humans," Ironscale said. "You've caused enough trouble. Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick. Continue to resist, and I will torture your crew for days before killing them." Jake stood up and walked toward the main viewing screen. Through the stars, he could see the massive Harvac battleships surrounding his small ship like wolves, circling wounded prey. "Tell Commander Ironscale that humans don't surrender when innocent people need help," Jake replied firmly. Lisa translated the message and sent it. Ironscale's response came back immediately, filled with anger and frustration. "He says we're idiots," Lisa reported. "He wants to know why we would die for aliens we barely know. says no intelligent species would be so stupid. Jake thought about Elder Coral Singer and the thousands of Zilani hiding in the deep ocean, waiting for rescue. He thought about the families torn apart by Harvac slave raids and the children who would grow up in a poisoned world if no one stopped the mining operations. Tell him, Jake said slowly, that's what makes us human. The Harvac fleet began moving into attack formation. Jake could see the weapon ports glowing with deadly energy on every enemy ship. In a few minutes, the Liberty would be nothing but scattered debris floating in space. Captain Matt called out, I'm detecting massive energy readings from all enemy ships. They're preparing to fire everything they have at once. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. They had fought as hard as they could, but it wasn't enough. At least they had saved over 1,000 Zilani lives and shown the galaxy that someone was willing to stand up to the Harvac Empire. All hands, prepare for impact, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. It's been an honor serving with all of you. The bridge crew sat quietly at their stations, waiting for the end. Karen checked her weapons one last time, even though they were useless against so many enemy ships. Matt tried to route more power to the shields, knowing it wouldn't make any difference. Lisa continued monitoring the communications, hoping for a miracle that would never come. Then suddenly, space around them lit up with new arrivals. Captain! Lisa shouted with excitement. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. It's the Earth fleet. Jake spun around to look at the tactical display. 18 human vessels had appeared at the edge of the star system, led by the massive Endeavor. Admiral Patricia Hayes had arrived 4 days early, pushing her ships beyond their safety limits to reach the battle in time. This is Admiral Hayes, aboard the UN's Endeavor, came a familiar voice over the communications system. Sorry we're late to the party, Jake. Hope you saved some of the bad guys for us. Jake felt tears of relief running down his face. Admiral, you have perfect timing. We're about 30 seconds away from becoming space dust. The Harvac fleet, caught completely by surprise, tried to regroup and face this new threat. But Admiral Hayes had planned her attack carefully. The human ships came in fast and spread out, refusing to give the enemy a single target to focus on. All ships. This is Hayes, the Admiral announced on the fleet channel. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth today. We're fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. Make every shot count. The battle that followed became known throughout the galaxy as the liberation of Aquatica Prime. The human fleet, outnumbered, fought with a determination that the Harvac had never encountered before. Captain Lucy Park of the UN's Defiance led a daring attack against Commander Ironscale's flagship. Her ship took heavy damage, but managed to destroy the enemy vessel's main weapon systems. Commander Steve Jackson coordinated with Zilani forces on the planet's surface to target Harvac mining platforms from below, while the space battle raged above. Matt Davis, working with Zilani scientists through long-range communication, achieved the breakthrough that won the battle. By reversing the polarity of the hydrocrystal extraction equipment on the mining platforms, they created a massive energy feedback that destroyed half the Harvac fleet in a single brilliant explosion. The remaining enemy ships, leaderless and badly damaged, tried to retreat, but Admiral Hayes wasn't finished with them. This is Admiral Hayes to all Harvac vessels, she announced on open channels. You have 30 seconds to release all Zilani prisoners and evacuate this system. After that, we consider you legitimate military targets. Commander Ironscale, his flagship crippled and his fleet in ruins, made one last desperate attempt to salvage his mission. He broadcast a message that Lisa quickly translated. He's calling for help from other Harvac fleets, Lisa reported. He says the humans are more dangerous than anyone realized. But no help came for the Harvac. The other alien civilizations that had ignored the Zilani distress calls were now watching carefully to see what these new humans would do next. The battle ended when the surviving Harvac ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind their mining equipment and thousands of freed Zilani prisoners. Commander Ironscale's last message before retreating became famous throughout the galaxy. Beware the humans, he warned other Harvac commanders. They fight for strangers as fiercely as they fight for themselves. As the human fleet moved into orbit around Aquatica Prime, Jake finally allowed himself to relax. They had done it, against impossible odds. They had saved an entire species from extinction. Captain Lisa announced, "Elder Coral Singer is requesting permission to come aboard. He wants to thank us personally." Jake smiled. "Tell him he's welcome anytime." Later, as Jake stood in the Liberty's main hangar bay watching Zilani families reunite with loved ones they thought were lost forever, he realized that humanity had crossed a line they could never uncross. They were no longer alone in the universe, and they had made their first impression as a species that would fight to protect the innocent. Admiral Hayes joined him in watching the emotional reunions. "You know, Jake, we've probably made a lot of enemies today. The Harvac won't forget this, and neither will the other species who chose to ignore the Zilani calls for help." Jake nodded. "Maybe so, but we've also made friends, and we've shown the galaxy what humans stand for." Outside the hangar bay windows, the blue-green oceans of Aquatica Prime sparkled in the sunlight, clean and healthy once again. The Zilani people were free, and humanity had found its place among the stars. 3 months after the liberation of Aquatica Prime, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Trade Consortium headquarters. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of alien civilizations, all staring at him with mixtures of curiosity, fear, and suspicion. Jake had been promoted to admiral after the successful rescue of the Zilani people. But today he felt the weight of representing all of humanity in their first major diplomatic encounter. The alien delegates around him included many of the 17 species that had ignored the Zilani distress calls. At the center of the chamber sat High Counselor Vex Thornweave, a tall, insect-like being who spoke for the Galactic Trade Consortium. His multiple eyes fixed on Jake as he began the session. "Admiral Morrison," Thornweave said through the universal translator, "humanity has caused considerable disruption to establish galactic order. Your attack on the Harvac Empire has consequences that extend far beyond one small planet." Jake remained standing calmly. "High Counselor, we responded to a distress call from people who were being murdered. I'm not sure what consequences you're referring to." A murmur went through the assembled delegates. Many of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ambassador Krell Goldmind of the Plutocracy League stood up to speak. "Admiral, you must understand that the Harvac Empire controls mining rights to over 40 systems. They're a significant economic force in this region of the galaxy. Your interference has disrupted trade relationships that took centuries to establish." Jake looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had heard the Zilani crying for help and chosen to ignore them. "Ambassador Goldmind, are you saying that trade relationships are more important than the lives of 50 million innocent people?" The plutocracy representative's golden skin darkened with embarrassment. "That's not what I meant. But there are established procedures for handling these situations. Protocols that maintain stability." "What protocols?" Jake asked pointedly. "The protocol where 17 different civilizations hear people begging for help and pretend they didn't receive the message?" High Counselor Thornweave raised one of his forearms for silence. "Admiral Morrison, the consortium has invited humanity to join our organization. We offer you junior membership status with full trading rights and protection under galactic law. All we ask is that you agree to follow established protocols in the future." Jake had expected this offer. The consortium wanted to control humanity by making them dependent on alien trade and technology. In exchange, humans would have to agree never again to interfere in situations like the Zilani crisis. "What exactly do these protocols say about species requesting help?" Jake asked. A thin, gray-skinned delegate from the neutral zone answered. "All requests for assistance must go through proper consortium channels. A committee reviews each case and determines whether intervention is justified based on economic impact and political stability." "How long does this committee review process take?" Jay pressed. The delegate looked uncomfortable. "Typically 18 to 24 months, depending on the complexity of the situation." Jake felt anger building in his chest. "The Zilani would have been extinct long before your committee finished reviewing their case." Elder Coral Singer, who had been sitting quietly in the observer section, rose from his water-filled chair. His bioluminescent patches glowed brightly with emotion as he activated his own translator. I speak for the Zilani people, he said, his musical voice carrying clearly through the chamber. For 8 months, we broadcast our cries for help across the galaxy. 17 civilizations heard us. 17 civilizations had the power to save us, and 17 civilizations chose to do nothing. The chamber fell silent. Many of the delegates looked away from the Zilani elder's glowing form. Had given up hope, Choral Singer continued. We believed the galaxy was filled with species who cared only for themselves. Then the humans came. They risked their lives for people they had never met, fought an enemy they couldn't defeat to protect strangers who could offer them nothing. In return, High Counselor Thornweave interrupted. Elder Choral Singer, we understand your gratitude, but you must consider the broader implications. If every species begins interfering in the affairs of others, it will lead to chaos and war. Jake stepped forward. High Counselor, with respect, the current system is already leading to chaos and war. The only difference is that the victims don't have anyone to help them. Ambassador Goldmine stood again. Admiral Morrison, surely you can see that your actions have made you enemies. The Harvac Empire has sworn revenge against humanity. Other militaristic species now view you as a threat. You need the protection that consortium membership provides. Jake looked around the chamber one more time, studying the faces of beings who had built their civilization on the principle of looking the other way when others suffered. Ambassador, Jake said clearly, I want to make sure I understand your offer. You want humanity to join an organization that would have let the Zilani die rather than upset trade relationships? In exchange for this membership, we would promise never again to help people who cry out for help. That's a rather simplistic way to put it, Thornweave replied stiffly. Jake nodded. Yes, it is simple. And that's exactly why humanity rejects your offer. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Several delegates stood up and began arguing among themselves. High Counselor Thornweave clicked his mandibles angrily. Admiral Morrison, you're making a serious mistake. Without consortium protection, humanity will face the Harvac Empire and other hostile forces alone. High Counselor, we've been alone in the universe for our entire history. We're used to it. But we won't be completely alone, he gestured toward Elder Choral Singer, who stood and moved to Jake's side. The Zilani people have agreed to form a mutual defense alliance with humanity. Any attack on human worlds will be considered an attack on Zilani territory. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. The Keth Republic also wishes to join this alliance. Jake turned to see Ambassador Zara Brightclaw, representing a species of feathered humanoids who had recently gained independence from Harvac occupation. 3 more species that had been victims of Harvac aggression also stood to declare their support for the new alliance. High Counselor. Thornweave's multiple eyes darted around the chamber nervously. This is highly irregular, you're talking about. Creating a competing power block that could destabilize the entire region. Jake faced the consortium leadership directly. We're creating an alliance of species who believe that when someone calls for help, you answer. If that destabilizes a system built on ignoring the suffering of others, then maybe it's time for a new system. As Jake prepared to leave the chamber, he delivered humanity's final message to the Galactic Trade Consortium. Any species that wants to trade with us, work with us, or be our friends is welcome, Jake announced. But we will not ask permission to do what's right. We will not join any organization that values profit over people. Jake and Elder Choral Singer walked out of the chamber together, leaving behind a room full of delegates struggling to understand. These strange humans who would risk everything for strangers 6 months later. Jake stood on the observation deck of the new UN's Liberty, converted from a warship into a monument orbiting Aquatica Prime. Through the windows, could see human and Zilani children playing together in the restored oceans below. The Mutual Defense Alliance had grown to include 12 species, all of them former victims of stronger powers who had been abandoned by the galactic community. They called themselves the Haven Coalition, and their founding principle was simple: no one fights alone. Communications Officer Lisa Grant, now a commander, joined Jake at the observation window. Admiral, we're receiving another distress call. This one is coming from the Vega system, about 20 light years from here. Jake smiled and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in the darkness, people were calling for help. And for the first time in galactic history, They could be certain that someone would answer. "Set course for Vega, Commander," Jake ordered. "Let's go see who needs help." As the Liberty's engines came to life and the ship turned toward the distant stars, Jake reflected on humanity's place in the galaxy. They had chosen to be the civilization that others could count on, regardless of the cost. It was a big responsibility, but it felt right. The universe was vast and often cold, but it was a little less lonely now that humans were there to answer when someone cried out for help.